Right, good evening and welcome to Freedrop's first webcast. We bought ourselves some flashy new equipment. We thought we'd test it out the day after the Masters, chew over some of the stuff that we saw over the weekend, put the worlds to rights over one or two issues that came up, I think, during the tournament. And, well, we'll see how it goes from there, really. But here we go. Freedrop's first webcast. So, hi, James.
Hi Dave, this is the first podcast. We had a lovely, amazing Masters weekend again.
It was a fantastic weekend. I thought a little bit probably 6 or 7 holes out on Sunday night. I thought the back nine wasn't going to live up to its famous reputation, as the Masters only starts on the back nine on a Sunday. But I thought it retrieved itself just when it all looked like it was going to go pear-shaped. But yeah, it was a great tournament.
Yeah, some of the big players turned up on the back nine. I think your Spieths, your Fowlers, they all made it a little bit more interesting, and Rory struggled to, I think, in the end.
Yeah, it was quite amazing, really, because I thought Spieth particularly almost managed to get himself into a position where he could have broke the course record. I think probably not making the eagle on 15 and then following that up with a quite incredible putt on 16 suggested he could do it, but out of nowhere, just like us on a Saturday or a Sunday, he managed to hit the ball into the trees off the 18th tee. Probably the most incredible thing he's probably ever done. You could tell by his reaction on the course that he was completely gutted and bewildered by what he'd done. But yeah, it was fantastic. And I thought Fowler, the steely resolve of Fowler really to hunt down Reed, almost catch him. It was a fantastic Sunday afternoon, really. Disappointed by McIlroy. And probably a little bit disappointed by perhaps Stenson or Fleetwood not getting into the real mix. But yeah, it was fantastic competition.
I think the likes of Spieth always seems to be there or thereabouts from Augusta. I think he always brings something special, and that sort of Tiger-esque dominance when he can get in ahead of someone. I think he had that poor Friday where he could have really taken the tournament like he always does. I think he always takes control, but just didn't quite turn up that day. I think let him down.
No, and I think you could also tell by his reaction when he managed to land the ball safely on the green on 12, Amen Corner on Sunday. But I think the thing about Spieth is that, you can never rule him out because he can simply put the ball from anywhere.
I think that's you see him inside 20 feet and you always feel like it's going to drop, and I think that's something he's always got going for him. Whereas you maybe someone like a Justin Rose is always sometimes just slips it by, and same with those 10-foot putts. It never seems to miss a 10-foot putt when he needs.
No, and I think that was probably Rose, Stenson, McIlroy, Fleetwood to some degree. I think over the weekend it was the putter that probably let them down. I'm not sure what was inside McIlroy's head on Sunday, but if you look at it, I mean, to be fair to Reed, worthy champion probably, but he was only treading water on Sunday. He never broke away from the pack. I mean, he only barely improved his overnight score, really. It was only Spieth and Fowler racing up from nowhere that, made it look interesting. I was really surprised that McIlroy wasn't able to, particularly on the front nine, get some putts away when he was in great positions and put some real pressure on Reed. I think, McIlroy's deflation, certainly by the time it was mid-round, it sort of said a lot. And you do wonder, I mean, I've said this before, I do wonder, there's no doubt that McIlroy's an outstanding, golfer, but you wonder whether or not he'll be able to progress from being outstanding to legendary, simply because he seems to me to have that missing ingredient. One of the things that struck me about Spieth and Fowler was that, Fowler's steely sort of resolve and Spieth's ability, you could almost see that they felt that they could get there. They had that sort of killer instinct. You never really saw that in McIlroy on Sunday.
I always think McIlroy's one or the other. I think he's either unbelievably unplayable, or it seems to be momentum at times. And I think if he misses a putt, he misses the next 6, and then he's par through 9, and he needs to be 2 or 3 under just to crank that pressure on Reed. But he was allowed to just play par golf and
he was
lazy his way in.
Yeah, and you do wonder really what sort of impact that might have psychologically on McIlroy. Spieth's had to get over his own demons at Augusta, but you do wonder whether or not in McIlroy's mind, he might view that as his best chance of the career Grand Slam, and he didn't make it over the line.
It's taken 7 years for him to be in contention again. Really, I mean, he's had the top 10 finishes, but he's not really been in contention the last few years. Really, he's been there or thereabouts. But this has been the first year where he's been in the final group, and you've really expected him to take on to the next and really push it on Reed to take it.
I mean, he's got as well that sort of reputation that he can't play in sort of windy, gusty conditions where it's wet. And you'd have thought, probably been born in Northern Ireland and been brought up on courses there where that's the sort of general climate. It seems a bit sort of strange to say, but I thought he looked. When you were saying about him being unplayable, I thought he looked that on the Saturday. To be honest, I thought he looked all over a champion, and I think probably the majority of people thought he'd take Sunday by the scruff of the neck and look for revenge on Reed from that famous Ryder Cup showdown.
I think so.
I mean, there's a few other things I think that are worth talking about. I think it's interesting. I know it's a long time until October in the Ryder Cup, but I thought it was an interesting test of the two squads really, because I think if you look at the Americans, Spieth, Thomas, Johnson, Bubba, Reed himself, one or two others, compared to the Europeans, Fleetwood, Rose, Casey, even Poulter. I mean, considering Poulter comes straight off the back of Houston, I think he did quite well. I wasn't even expecting him to make the cut, and he kept fighting. So I'm sure McIlroy will also be very much part of that. I just wondered whether or not we saw anything at Augusta that would suggest that once we're in Paris, some of those showdowns could be quite titanic.
I think so. But I guess with it being on home soil, it might help out a little bit. I think get that momentum behind him rather than, I guess, having.
I just get the feeling. I mean, I've thought this, through the end of last season and the start of this season, that maybe the depth of the European squad is deeper. But I just think those Americans, they're a very young group of Americans, a very hungry group of Americans, and I just thought on Sunday at Augusta, you saw with Spieth, you saw with Reed, Bubba came through as well. Johnson held his own. Thomas was there. Whether or not it is the fact that they've just got that more mental strength, I don't know. I expected Stenson and Fleetwood to feature more than they did. I know that Stenson's had his first top 10 finish at the Masters, but again, we didn't see an awful lot of it in the coverage. But putting woes, Fleetwood's a phenomenal player. I think Casey declaring that he'll play more European Tour golf so that he's eligible to play in Paris, I think will make a massive difference. So I mean, I do recognise. I think the Europeans have got strength in depth. I just think maybe the Americans have got more of a stomach for a fight. I don't know.
Yeah, that's sort of a clutch factor golf where they're making the big putts in the big moments, I think.
What did you make of the way that Augusta was laid out? It is always pristinely presented, but I've got my own thoughts on the sub-air system under the greens.
I think it's that sort of, they want it to be the same every time. I think the only protection that course has got now is having hard and difficult greens. I think they all hit it over 300 yards. I mean, you see that on 13 where now they can just drive it over the corner instead of having to try and hit a draw. And so it takes, probably adds 50 yards, and then that means they're hitting a wedge into the green rather than, I don't know.
I just wonder whether or not, using systems like sub-air, it's Augusta's claim, the Masters claim that it's the premier of the majors. I mean, I don't share that view. I genuinely think the Open is the premier major. I think it for a variety of reasons. I think the history and the heritage of the Open, I think it's got massive gravitas. I think the fact that the Open has a bigger field and the consequences, I suspect, of potentially 4 seasons in one day on a British links course, compared to Augusta where you've got a limited field. You've got that, I think, quite frankly, quite ridiculous lifetime exemption. If you look at the fact that, Spieth won his first green jacket when he was 21, and he's got an exemption for life, and probably future Masters champions will all be reasonably young. How long is it before the exemptions potentially start to erode away the number of qualifiers from either inside the top 50 or even invitations? So I do wonder whether or not something like the sub-air system it in some ways potentially deflects away from how hard the course is. Like you say, it's always presented in the same condition. You can tee off on a British links course in perfect sunshine, as we've seen over the years, hail, rain, sort of heavy gusting winds. I just think that if you win a British Open, you really have had a test of golf, and I do wonder. I thought yesterday some of the golf for the players, like you say, hitting 330 yards, turning par fives into two shot to the green, the number of eagles.
Yeah. You
It's all
saw
right,
Reed get
Gus.
two, didn't you,
Well,
on a Saturday?
yeah, and it's all right. The Augusta people talking about lengthening the course, but was that course designed to be lengthened? Was its true difficulty, sort of now being completely eroded by technology?
Well, I think it's that age-old question, isn't it? Is it? I think it's that mix of new technology with super fit athletes. I think Woods was that first person to initiate.
Yeah.
I think would people like Spieth have gone into golf if Woods wasn't around to inspire him to pick up some clubs? I think
No, it's a good point. It's a good point. I suppose it's that bias. We're in the UK, and we love the Open, and I think the stories down the years. But I do think when you listen to the players talking, it's the Open that they desperately want. I mean, everybody wants a green jacket in their locker, and there's no doubt it's an incredible tournament. But I think the fact it's played on the same course that if you think of Spieth, I mean by the time he's 40, he'll have played that course in tournament golf 20 times, and you don't have the same luxury if with the rotation of the Open. And I think genuinely the weather conditions, I really think that the Open's a complete test of golf. I'm not sure Augusta is. I think a couple of other things that I would like to reflect a little bit on Rory and perhaps that little bit really. What is the missing ingredient that would have got him over the line on Sunday? Is it mental strength? Is it just the fact that he just couldn't get going and that frustrated him?
I think it always seems to come down to putting with him, because I think his wedge play is unreal. I think when he gets himself out of position, he can chip it within 5-6 foot easily, and then maybe that's missing his iron slightly. But I think it is that kind of confidence when he gets to the greens. I think they were commenting on that he maybe taking not as much time as he was on the last 3 days over his putts. Maybe missing that first one really drove him on to not help.
Yeah, it was interesting. I read a piece today that on the first day of practice, Patrick Reed hit 5,000 putts on the greens on the course itself, which is an incredible. I mean, I don't know whether or not he played the full 18, but that again, you wonder whether or not. I'm not saying that he didn't, but to what degree McIlroy considered that element of the game on those greens to be that important. It struck me on Sunday that he didn't seem to put as much time into the preparation of the putt. He seemed quite content to line it up and literally just hit it. And quite a few times I thought he missed by considerable distance at the standard that he wasn't just leaving things on the edge of the cup. He was slipping them by quite noticeably. I just think it's that bit for me. He has won majors. Famously the US Open, but I just felt yesterday when he was stood on the first tee, what was going through his mind that was different to what was going through perhaps Spieth's mind or Fowler's mind. Fowler, I mean, I thought just ground the course down. I thought he played brilliantly, but Spieth has something different. Spieth has, that sort of ability to turn almost any situation into a win.
Well, yeah, I think yesterday displayed that. I think he's no right to be in contention on the 18th tee, where if he birdies that, he's got a playoff, hasn't he? I think so. I think it would have been -10 for the day. I think. So he's one good tee off from the course record, really.
Indeed, and I mean, of course, Casey was within 3 holes of the course record and wasn't able, unfortunately, to see that through. But again, a phenomenal player. Spent a lot of time in America over the last few years. Obviously, exempted himself from the last Ryder Cup, but it seems to me that Casey seems to have decided that he needs to have his own golf legacy, really, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens through the rest of the season. Obviously, I suppose the timing of a big championship in the UK, like the BMW, which is not far away now. It'll be interesting to see how the European players kick off the European season. Obviously, we've got the Rolex series, so the cash incentive is massive. But it'll be very interesting to see, how strong the Europeans are, in a major European Tour competition like the BMW.
Interested to see how the Americans get on as well, because I think they only really come over in Europe, Ryder Cup years to compete in the big events. So I think it'd be interesting to see how they get on in maybe more challenging conditions with the weather, where it's not pristine Florida, South Carolina, whether you can just rock up.
Well, you have got that in the UK, and I mean, I suppose the top courses, your Wentworths and your Wobans and places like that, they probably come into condition simply because they've got the green staff, they've got the technology, and they've got the money to do that. But I mean, it's been a pretty rough winter and early spring, so it'll be interesting to see exactly how conditioned the courses are. And I think the other thing, looking towards the Ryder Cup, I mean, you are going to see more Americans playing on the European Tour, and you are going to see, perhaps the European Tour players coming back into the European Tour a little bit more than they ordinarily would. But Paris is quite some way away, and again, I think over the weekend, certainly for the sort of 3 days, I thought the Europeans. I genuinely expected the Masters, the green jacket, to come to European, really.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right.
Well, that's us for tonight. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast. We'll be coming back to this time and time again over the course of the season. Thanks for listening, and don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and pick up the podcasts and the vlogs on our YouTube channel. See you later.